Tell me why it's strange from your perspective. Um, it's a shame that people don't take all the opportunities that are offered to them, for sure. It's definitely a shame, and everyone has a choice. At the same time, not every system is for everybody, right? If you've got a wide variety of people and you've got one system, then there's going to be some people who fall through the cracks in the system. There was an opportunity there to do something. He chose not to do it, and there's a consequence for that. There's always a consequence for not following the rules. And it would be interesting to know what was behind all of his decisions and what his priorities were and who was supporting him in those priorities, because obviously there was more to that case than just one simple choice, probably a series of choices over time. Perhaps he was advised by the wrong people. Perhaps he got the wrong advice. Yeah, lazy is an interesting concept because lazy is not the reason. Lazy is the result. Lazy is the externally observed situation. Now, I'm not saying that some people are not lazy, and I'm not saying that some people are not hardworking or more hardworking than others, because obviously they are. But in general, lazy is projected onto people from an external observation in general. Now, sometimes it's projected correctly, but human beings tend to be creative and active most of the time. If you want an obscure example of this, think about criminals. The criminals are very creative in a lot of their criminality. Now, I don't think it's right, but they use their human creativity for the wrong reasons. But it's something they do. Lazy, is in a similar but not the same category to bored, where people feel limited by their options and choices, and so choose to do nothing because they feel that they can't determinate the outcome of the situation. So they choose to shut down and do nothing instead of doing something. Why do nothing instead of something? Because the person believes within themselves that they can't alter the outcome. Obviously, there was some kind of stress there for him. Obviously. And obviously, he didn't want to go through that stress. Now, sometimes we need adversity to push us through to the other side, and sometimes we don't, and because we can just shut down inside our brains, and it's quite possible that he chose to shut down just because it was too stressful for him at that point in time. And that's difficult to see, and it is difficult to help with, and it's really difficult to help people who don't ask for help. So perhaps all of these things contributed to the end result. There's a lot of migrants who love the opportunity to work and want to work, and there's a lot of migrants that just want to make money as fast as possible. And when you don't have a core culture, as immigrants very often don't have a core culture. They're just all fighting amongst themselves to survive as best as they can. It's law of the jungle. They're all they're in an animalistic state in the sense of their fight for survival, and they will do whatever it is they can do, whatever it is that they need to do in order to survive. We've all been tempted by the morally wrong choice in life. It's something that is offered to everybody. The devil is everywhere and everything. We've all been tempted by it. Some people are going to be weaker than others, and accept that. And it doesn't always happen in the lower echelons of society. Sometimes it happens in the higher echelons of society as well. Having a migrant class that are criminals is a mirror of having a government class that are criminals and don't care. You know, government is window dressing, right? It's a lot of discussion. It's a lot of talk. It's parlay. You know, it's a lot of language where the outcome isn't really affected very much. It doesn't seem to matter what the left and the right argue about. The end result seems to be pretty much the same. I mean, government is the people that we hear about in government are the ministers who are in charge of certain organizations, but we don't hear about the people in the organizations that are in charge of the organizations. And organizations are run by people. And people are a powerful force, and if you have the wrong people in the wrong place, everything's going to go in the wrong direction. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter who your leaders are. If your army is not listening to you, you 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 can't go in any specific direction. Um, I think a classic example of this in recent history, and there's thousands throughout history, but the most classic example is um, when Donald Trump was president in the United States. He made decisions and no one listened to him. Now you can argue about the positives and negatives of that. You can argue on one side, well, it's great that people didn't listen to him because they didn't like what he was saying anyway and they didn't want to do it. And you could argue, but if he is in that role, in that position, it's the subordinates' duty to listen, respect, and follow his rules. Even if you don't agree with the captain of the army, if you're in the army, you have to follow the captain's orders, even if you don't agree with it, because people die if you don't, right? And and so there's a positive and negative to that. And throughout Europe, there is unfortunately a strong trend at this time towards supporting. I say unfortunately, it depends. It depends on the person's personal perspective, and each situation is individual. But there's a strong support of immigration and migration, and this has a massive negative effect on the stability of culture within each country. And cultures, never forget about races, just forget about races. Cultures don't mix. And within races, you have separate cultures. And those cultures don't mix, right? You can have, you can have African American Christians and African American Muslims. And sometimes they're not going to mix because their ideologies are different. And that's got nothing to do with race. That's about personal perspective or perspective of communities that you belong to. And so there's always going to be some level of problem. And every 100 years or so, sometimes sooner, there are mass immigrations across the world, just as was during the 19th century, or during the 20th century after the wars, during the 19th century, you could argue for the whole century. During the 18th century, there were massive migrations from Europe to North America. So it's a cycle of history, but it has to be done carefully, and there's not an intelligent person in the world that doesn't understand that if you want migrants into your country, you want qualified migrants who are going to take, like if you apply for a job and you get the job, then you go, right? Then you go. Like I did 20 years ago when I took a job for the company in Europe. I was in Britain and I applied for the job in Europe and I got it and I went there. So there's no reason to stop people doing that. And it's an odd situation. Everybody wants to be helpful to everybody else.